Isaac.
Rabbi, good afternoon. Good
Yeah,
afternoon. How are you? How's your day going so far?
going great. It's going great. Is that a new chord? It looks like a
Oh,
right
it's
arm.
just not the same. It's the same one. I've had this for a while. It's YU chord.
Oh, wow. The best kind of chord.
Yes, it is. Anyway, shall we get started?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are on verses, I guess we'll do verses 211 and 212.
Mhm. The Gospel according to Saint Matthew, chapter 2, verse 11 onwards. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way.
Wow, a lot of great questions here, Isaac.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so I'll start. And they came into the house and they saw a young child with Mary. So
Mhm.
the first question I guess we have to understand is, what is Mary doing in this narrative? Is it specifically Mary in contradistinction to Joseph? Is it just that he's, as you mentioned a couple of times, we really don't know how old the baby is. So is it that the baby, the young child in this case, is with Mary because she happens to be with the baby, or is there some other reason that we want necessarily to talk about Mary here? Because this is the first mention we really have of Mary.
Of Mary, and probably
Uh,
this is the first time where the author doesn't speak from the perspective of Joseph. And as you mentioned, this is the first time he acknowledges Mary or speaks from her perspective. And this is also the first time where they fell down and they worshipped him. We discussed this earlier as to what does it mean they want to worship him, but here's where the author delineates as to what's meant by worship, where that they fell down. And I think one can imagine the reaction in the face of Mary and Joseph. And here's a child whom they knew is somebody who's special. They don't have all the answers, and these strangers show up from a different faith tradition, and they bowed down and worshiped them. I can't imagine what questions would have gone through their mind.
right, and especially keep in mind that if he's with Mary, it would have been viewed as them bowing down to her as well.
Hmm.
Uh,
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So as you mentioned, we were unclear about what worship means, and over here it seems it means fell down. But you could definitely argue that the end of the verse, when it says mentioned all the gifts that they are brought, that might be a form of worship as well, though it seems more unlikely.
Hmm. And I think we probably touched upon this in an earlier conversation, where these gifts both have financial value and symbolic value, right? Where myrrh and frankincense were, it's part of some anointing oils in the ancient scriptures. The gold, as we all know, has got financial value, but these gifts, it could mean both a gift and also symbolically could have been something, or could have meant something for both the Magi and Mary,
Right.
Joseph, and
So the
Jesus.
three categories that are possibilities is when we talk about gold, that is definitely the monarchy is generally viewed as being part of the gold, and definitely the tabernacle is covered in gold, and the instruments used in the tabernacle were covered in gold. Frankincense is usually one of the spices. Lavona is one of the spices that's used in offerings, but myrrh, as we saw in Exodus, is specifically one of the ingredients. The resin comes from the tree is one of the ingredients that is made in the anointing oil for a king. So definitely we could feel that this is three separate categories, but all dealing with forms of monarchy or priesthood or the high life of a king at that point.
Mhm.
I guess it's unclear if these gifts were just the things that they had on them. The fact is that generally these things are not coming from the East as much as coming from Saudi Arabian countries, from Arab kind of countries. And they're not probably found as often in places that are what we consider East. So for example, myrrh, according to Wikipedia, is native to Somalia, Oman, Yemen, Eritrea, Ethiopia, parts of Saudi Arabia, to the exclusion of what we usually call the Eastern countries. So I
Mhm.
guess it's a good question of what are they trying to accomplish with these gifts? And even the fact they had gifts, is this something that Herod noticed? That they just
Yeah.
take things out of their pockets? And on top of that, the question is, who are these gifts for? Because if you give a gold chain to a baby, he might use it, but more likely than not, the parents Mary and Joseph would be able to use them.
Yeah. So I have a follow-up question. So when they give gifts of gold and frankincense, like when they mean gold, right? I mean, what kinds of ornaments do they give, right? So back in India, where I'm from, gold means people give earrings or chains or bangles, because that's what gold is in a way. So when they say gifts of gold, I don't think they give them a bar of gold. So okay, here's a piece of gold. They probably give them some form of ornament. Was the crown? What do you think? What do you think they gave them in gold?
Well, that's a great question. And definitely the word is ambiguous because the fact is that money sometimes was called gold in that time
I
period.
see.
And sometimes you're right, you would say a gold earring, a gold something. So I think you're definitely pointing out an ambiguity in the text that it's really unclear if they, it would be weird for them to give them a gold bar. And to say that, I was arguing that gold had to do with monarchy, and you're giving an example of a crown, but it's hard to imagine that they didn't give it to something with symbolic meaning even for them. Maybe if they came from the East, they could give them like something would read regal from their perspective.
And I think that this is the first time where in the next verse where he's just quoted as Herod. After they have worshipped the king, after they worship Jesus, the verses fall after that, it's just Herod and not King Herod, and not King Herod after that. So being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country. And so the question becomes, so we know that there were at least that there were more than one Magi. And when they had a dream, right, they should have come to some consensus, because they decided that they would visit the child and then go back to Herod. And so when they had a dream, it's not any one person, but a group of, it's more than one people, and they were terrified in the dream, and so, or they were warned in a dream. So it wasn't a pleasant dream. It's something which shook the life out of them, saying this is what you should do or this is what you shouldn't do.
Right. So first you're noting is that we do note that the only two times King Herod is called King Herod is in the first two times. And the rest of the time, we generally don't see him called, like as in 2:1, we don't really see him called King Herod after that. Once we get to 2:7, and we have the wise men transitioning into kind of like announcing the King of the Jews, it might be a little cute clue that the author of Matthew notes that he's no longer really called King Herod. He's more called the king. But he's not called king anymore. He's more just called Herod. And
I'm
that's really
sorry, I misspoke. I think it starts with verse 2:7. In 2:7 also is called Herod. So
right.
that's after they've announced that the prophetic word that the king will be born in Bethlehem. 2:7 starts with Herod, and so 2:11 or 2:12 is a continuation of 2:7, where he's just addressed as Herod.
Right. And we see in 2:3, he's definitely mentioned as King Herod.
King, yeah.
And so it's definitely an interesting point. One point that we want to make sure to note is that the level of prophecy and or dream interpretation that we have. What we noticed when we talked about the first mention of the dream is that Joseph specifically had an angel of the Lord come to him. And we'll see in 2:13 again, an angel of the Lord will come to Joseph. But over here, we see specifically it's just a dream. And not only can we not tell if it's awake or sleeping, but it also seems, at least from my perspective, want to note that the Magi are on a lower spiritual level than Joseph, in that the way that they have divine intervention in their lives is through dream and not specifically through an angel of the Lord speaking to them.
Well, wouldn't you say that this idea or their experience where they were able to find the king through a star? Wouldn't that qualify as a form of spiritual, as a form of revelation of sorts, a different kind, not necessarily a dream? I mean, like it's the whole thing is so magical, right? They see a star and then they
Well,
travel. They
it's a
would.
really good question. And I would say the fact that it goes from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, that definitely seems like a specific level of divine intervention. But the earlier step where they just came from they saw a star in the east and in 2:2, and they just kind of followed the star, or they interpreted the star, it seems according to them and according to the astrologers in Herod's court, that was just normal. That wasn't any divine intervention. That was how to interpret that star.
My biggest takeaway from all this is that what, at least from a Christian reading, what I see these verses telling me is that no amount of cunningness or shrewdness or the wealth or the leaders of this world can thwart the works of God. That God can even work through these pagan, non-Jewish, non-Christian Magi who believe in astrology, and of all things astrology, that God can work through anything and everything. Now, I mean, this is not the only meaning, but again, from a Christian
That being
perspective.
said, though, it does note that they departed onto their own country another way. which probably, you know, Bethlehem being like the equivalent of metropolis in the first century, as much as it can be, it would have had a road back north to Jerusalem, but it probably would have had a road also straight to the east, which would have hit with the Jordan River. And they definitely were aware, and God was aware that they should not go back through Herod's court.
So you're saying Bethlehem is a metropolis? I was under the
Again, like,
impression
I'm using that word loosely. Even Jerusalem,
yeah.
like all these cities, it was the big city back in the day in comparison to a village of 10, 20 people.
On that note, Rabbi, it's been a great conversation. I enjoyed the first two sections.
Okay. We'll call that a day, and I'll see you soon.
See you soon. Thank you.